I think I might have forgotten to make a video yesterday, I don't remember, but it doesn't matter because time is an illusion anyway, especially when you're neat. So, uh, today's topic is enjoyment versus value in art. I've been trying to think of like a really, really clever, genius way where I can explain this and everyone will instantly understand it, but when talking about art, you can never really do that. Like, there's never something, there's not really specifics. It's hard to get into specifics with art because there's always exceptions to every rule, and it's just you can't really do it. So I've been literally for like a year. I've had this idea for a video, and I've been like, or not even a video, just like an argument, just like a thought that I've been struggling to put into like very clean, concrete terms, and I just haven't been able to do it. So this is going to be an attempt, but don't expect like genius level speaking. Okay, so art, like in general, is cool. What is good? There's like two different types of good. Something can be enjoyable and something can be valuable. And sometimes things are enjoyable and valuable, but sometimes they're just one of the two. So, for example, valuable to me. So, for example, take like a Marvel movie. Take like Avengers Endgame, right? Avengers Endgame is, to be fair to the movie, pretty enjoyable. It has a lot of spectacular action, some quippy dialogue, a reasonably interesting plot, and reasonably well motivated characters. Like Thanos is a reasonably well written villain. And there's the moment when you see all of the people from all the movies, and the music swells, and it gives you musical frisson, right? Because it's crafted to do that, and the visual effects are excellent. It's a well crafted movie. It's not a well. It's a well crafted. Uh, what does Scorsese say? Like, it's a well crafted roller coaster ride. It works well as a roller coaster ride, but it has very little value to me as a movie. I enjoyed watching it. I'm not gonna lie. I think most people who watched it probably enjoyed it. Um, it is like the highest grossing movie of all time, if I remember correctly. Um, so yeah, it's a pretty enjoyable movie, and it's actually not that hard to make something enjoyable. Um, Most art is fairly enjoyable, but it's of zero value to me. It has of very little value to me. Nothing of value was gained by watching that movie. I never think about the emotional resonances of that movie. I never think about the sci-fi concepts as like a philosophical thing. I never think about anything I learned about myself or society or humanity or the world. I never think they didn't do any. It's a fucking Avengers movie. It didn't do any of that. It's not supposed to do any of that. But it was fairly enjoyable to watch, but completely not valuable at all. Compare that to my favorite movie, which is Tokyo Story. Well, it may be my second favorite movie. I'm not sure, but one of my favorite movies, which is Tokyo Story. Now, Tokyo Story, I hate to say it, is kind of boring. It's kind of a boring movie. Nothing much happens. It's a pretty old movie, so the pacing is like kind of boring and plodding. Kind of plods along. Most of it's just characters talking to each other. There's zero action, of course. There's no fucking action at all. It's Tokyo Story. It's mostly just characters talking to each other in quiet rooms, about really quite mundane, everyday subjects. It's not a very it's not like a super bombastic, enjoyable, edge of your seat movie. It's kind of boring, but it is incredibly valuable because what those characters are talking about made me learn a lot about humanity, made me appreciate the struggles of groups of people that I've never really appreciated before, made me see things through a different lens that I've never seen anything through before, gave me a cinematic masterclass in framing and blocking. It's incredible. Every single frame in that movie contains infinite value. You can deconstruct it for years, and critics have deconstructed it for years, or analysts have deconstructed it for years since it came out. The dialogue is, while not very exciting, full of little nuggets of information about the characters, and those nuggets of information about the characters aren't just like the same as an Avengers movie where they're just about the characters. They are they teach you about the world. They make you empathize. You know, before watching Tokyo Story, found it very, very difficult. I've told this story before, but before watching Tokyo Story, I found it. I basically didn't give a fuck about old people. I was like, I found it impossible to relate to their problems. After watching Tokyo Story, now it changed me as a person in a certain way, because now I feel much more able to relate to the struggles of older people and to, you know, empathize with them and see like, oh, you know, they're not just fucking old people, fuck them. It's like they have their own fucking problems to deal with too, and like here's the problem here. I've seen them firsthand in this movie, and I empathize with them, and now I can never go back to a state of being a worse person where I didn't empathize with a whole group of people for no reason. Now for the reason that I didn't know, you know, I didn't know anything about them. I had nothing to share, nothing in common. But I've seen this great movie, and it's changed my outlook on life. And now it's like, no, you know what? Like, I know I've experienced these feelings with these characters, and it's changed me as a person. It's changed the way I look at the world. And I refer back to it in my mind when I'm thinking about certain issues. I'm thinking, like, wow, like, you know, it's a whole, that's value. That is value. Compare another thing. If you're friends with me, you know, I reference Star Trek The Next Generation a lot. That is an incredibly valuable work. An incredibly valuable TV show. Now, obviously, Star Trek is not a perfect show. There are a lot of dodgy episodes. But there are many times where I will think about, like, episodes when I'm just going through my life and I encounter some sort of problem, philosophical or otherwise, and I'll think back to a Star Trek episode where they dealt with something similar, and it will give me a perspective that is useful for thinking about things. You know, it goes back to my other video that I made about the metacognitive theory of art. It will help me to orient myself in the world and the wider world of philosophical and interpersonal problems. It will help me to understand more completely the world that I live in and who I am as a person. Sorry, dripping a bit. That is valuable art. Serial Experiments Lain, my favorite anime, helps me to understand the wider philosophical implications of the technology I use every day and the nature of the self and stuff like that. That is very much... And listen, this is the important thing, is it doesn't have to be deep philosophical stuff like Tokyo Story or Star Trek or Lane, which all deal with heavy philosophical subjects a lot of the time. Also, character studies and stuff like that, they don't have to be sort of deep narrative philosophical stories. Take, for example, Hidamari's Sketch, which is my second favourite anime. Hidamari's Sketch is on the surface very much not bothering with or not interested in philosophy or interpersonal relationships or these sorts of things in the same way Star Trek is. Like, Star Trek is very much wears its opinions on its sleeve about those sorts of things. Right? It's very much easy to tell that Star Trek is about metaphors for problems that humans face in real life and speculative fiction and so on. Whereas Hidamari's Sketch is like, seems like it's just about these girls hanging out doing art. But the same sort of value is present. The same sort of value is present. You just have to look a little deeper. Same with K-On!, same with a lot of these sorts of slice of life shows that I really like. It's just a bit more subtle, but the same value is present. And when I think about friendship is a very important, aspect of human existence. And what better way to understand deeper the complexities of friendships than by studying and learning from a piece of art demonstrating the intricacies of friendships and complex friend dynamics with Yuri undertones, because that's the best type of friend dynamic. Like, what better way to understand the world more completely than by watching something like that? It may not be super present, it may not be Dama Congelada Tanagra, right? It may be a bunch of anime girls hanging out after school, but the lessons are still there, the message is still there. And obviously, all of this is subjective. You could technically read the same thing into any piece of art, which is why, it's art. It's all subjective. So you can't say well, then if I don't get that sort of value out of an Avengers movie, no one can get that sort of value out of an Avengers movie. Or, for example, I don't get that sort of value at all. I don't get this friend dynamic value out of shonen friend dynamics. I find them to be shit, just to put it, in an obvious manner. I find them to be boring and rubbish. I don't like them. They're sort of nakama friend dynamic, I like to call it. They're like, we're all comrades and that sort of thing. Sometimes I get it out of that. Like Magikoi, which I'm reading right now. Maji de Batashi ni Koi Shinasai, the visual novel, has a similar sort of thing. It's a bit different. It's a bit more subtle and well thought out than most of these shonen friend dynamics that I've seen. Mostly, well, I don't know. But the point being, I don't get that out of shonen most of the time. Like Hunter x Hunter, my favorite shonen, loved watching it, had great fun watching every single episode, of incredibly little value to me. I learned nothing about humanity, nothing about my place in the world or how the world works at larger point. I am never in a point in my life when I think back on a Hunter x Hunter episode and it teaches me something. Not once. The only time I ever refer to Hunter x Hunter is when I'm making an argument similar to this, which is I use Hunter x Hunter as a reference for a good shonen and why it doesn't speak to me that much compared to good other genres. That is the only time I reference Hunter x Hunter on a meta level about the text, not about the content of the text itself. Rather than, Star Trek or Lane or Hito My Sketch or something like that. Hunter x Hunter is of very little value to me. It's mostly spectacle. Even the philosophical parts are mostly spectacle. The part that everyone talks about, the sort of like supposed to be deep of Hunter x Hunter, where the fucking, I watched this like 5 years ago, whatever, so I don't remember their names, but the blind girl's playing shogi against the evil dictator person in the Chimera Ant arc. That's the bit that's supposed to be like the emotional, like a really emotional thing. To me, it's that's also a spectacle. Like that's not that's not emotional in the same way as Tokyo Story is emotional. For example, a funeral scene in Tokyo Story is emotional. To me, one of them is about human connection and the idea of like these people seem villainous, but like this sort of thing happens every day. But also, we've seen these people's lives, and can you really blame them for being somewhat selfish in this situation? Like everyone has their own circumstances that they have to deal with, and like, are they evil, or can you really blame them for behaving selfishly in this type of situation? Do they really not care about these people? Do you care about these people? Would you have cared if you hadn't spent a whole movie hanging out with them? Would you have behaved in the same way at a funeral? And if you were one of these characters, are they bad people for acting like this? If they are bad people, why are they bad people? What does that say widely about society? If they aren't bad people, again, why? What does that say more widely about society? Why are these questions important in the first place? What does death mean? Like, all of these things are brought up in this emotional situation. In the fucking Chimera Ant arc, all I get is this scene is supposed to make you cry. We put this scene in because when you make someone cry, they form a deeper emotional connection to your work, and then they buy more DVDs and we make more money. That's what I get out of it. There is some deeper philosophical stuff, like a bit, but it's not, and that's the peak of the show. That is the absolute emotional peak of the show. It doesn't, there's 140 something episodes, and those couple of episodes with the chess game or whatever the fuck they're playing are the height of that. And it never reaches that again, and it never reaches that before. And that's like towards the end of the show. And it's fine, it's good, but it's not very valuable. It's very entertaining. It's very entertaining to watch. It's incredibly entertaining to watch. And spectacular, and even, in a sense, emotional and moving. But not in a way that is very valuable at all. Because really, there is no wider interpretation of that scene. I mean, maybe you could read some into it. Maybe some people do. Maybe to certain people, that scene made you empathize with blind people more, or changed the way you look at the world in some way. And that's what art is supposed to do. But for me, that sort of thing is not valuable at all. That sort of thing is just, entertaining, but not very valuable. I'm trying to. This is the thing, right? Is that I remember Star Trek episodes from that I watched once when I was 8 years old, but I have basically no recollection of what the fuck happened in the Chimera Ant arc. Even though I remember enjoying it while I was watching it, I don't remember the specifics of those scenes. I just remember feeling emotional and then forgetting about it a few moments later when the climax big fights happened. And then being angry that the final arc of the show was literally the exact same as Sherlock season 4. Oh my god, there's a secret little sister that we've never learned about who's the most powerful being on the planet. Yeah, that's the exact same plot as Sherlock season 4. Anyway, sorry, just gotta get my rant out about Hunter x Hunter. Anyway, that's enjoyment versus value in art. Certain art is very valuable because and it could be valuable for other reasons. I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's say something could be valuable for like nostalgic reasons, or because like, and by nostalgic I mean like maybe you had your first kiss to a certain song and now that song is really meaningful to you, or you listen to a particular band at a certain time in your life and now listening to that band, you know, is a valuable experience, brings you back to that time even if the content of that band isn't very good. Like that's another type of value in art. I'm not really talking about that, but that is a perfectly valid way to experience art, of course. So yeah, something like that. How long have I been recording? 16 minutes? Yeah, that's good enough. That's the difference between value and entertainment. Something can be very entertaining. Something can be like great fun to watch, and you might even cry. You might even cry, but crying is not the same as an actual valuable experience. And now I don't cry watching movies and stuff. I don't know why, just never have. But a lot of people do. And people confuse something that is able to make you cry with something that is actually good. They're not the same thing. They're different things. That's why Anohana, not a good show. You might think it's a good show because it made you cry. But I can make you cry by punching you in the face. Does that make me a good person? No.